Hi, this is Renee Bodie calling from sunny San Jose, California, and you are listening to Two Broads Talking Politics.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. My other broad tonight is returning guest, freelance journalist Kaz Weida. Hi, Kaz.
Hello.
So tonight we're going to talk about gerrymandering. We've done a couple of episodes on gerrymandering before, but it's been a while and there's some recent court action on gerrymandering, so thought it would be a good time to talk again. Where should we start? Kaz, maybe we should just kind of give an overview on how redistricting works, how it's supposed to work, and then what gerrymandering is. The major points that people should know about redistricting in general is that it happens every 10 years after the census. So each district, each congressional district, each one of the 435 seats right now has a little over 700,000 people in it, ideally. And so each state, depending on whether they have lost or gained people, probably each district will have slightly, assuming we don't add any seats, which I don't think we will, each district will probably have slightly more people after the 2020 census. And so the idea is to draw the lines for each congressional district so they all have roughly the same number of people in them. These are federal seats, but the Constitution says that the states, once it's been determined how many representatives each state should have based on population, within the states can decide how those lines are drawn. So that's sort of the bird's eye, high-level view of what redistricting is and when it happens. Different states have lots of different ways of doing this, and there's a whole lot more that we can get into. But do you want to sort of explain a little bit what we mean when we say gerrymandering specifically?
So gerrymandering's been around for a really long time. I think it's actually named after, I believe it was a governor back in the 1800s who began this sort of practice. But it's the idea that you can skew how you set up the districts to favor a certain party. Or, sometimes what they're doing is playing a little bit of identity politics. So they're they call it packing and cracking. They are packing together people who, because of their demographic, race usually, or sometimes income, might be unfriendly to their party or friendly to their party, and they want all those people in one place so they can skew the vote one way or another. And one of the things that we look at when we try to decide is how the way that these districts are set up, does it meet the standard for gerrymandering, is we would look at their compactness. And what that means is the way the district is drawn, does it encompass people who are generally in the same geographic area, you might have the same interests. For instance, if you live in, the far north of the state in a rural area and you've got a big horse farm and you're out wherever, you have very different priorities perhaps than someone who lives in the city, who doesn't have a car and rides public transportation and, works at a big corporation downtown, right? Those are pretty different lives that we're talking about, pretty different interests, despite whatever race or income or level of education you might have. So when we talk about whether a district has been gerrymandered, we look at, I believe they judge it on an 80% compactness. Are those districts compact geographically? And do they allow groups that might have the same interests to be in the same district? So that's sort of a very broad strokes what is gerrymandering.
Yeah, and so I think one thing that can be helpful when looking at this is sort of looking at example cases. And so the cracking part of packing and cracking is if you take a a bunch of people, let's say, who would all vote Democrat, if this is partisan gerrymandering we're talking about, and you break them up into a whole bunch of different districts. And so one really good example of this is Austin, Texas. Austin, obviously very blue area, could probably support more than one blue district if it was drawn that way. But Austin's been divided into something like 7 different congressional districts. Only one of those is a Democratic House member right now. So that's sort of breaking up the vote. If you're looking at packing, I think Alabama's a really good example of this. Alabama only has 1 Democratic district because they found basically all of the African-American residents in Alabama and drew the line around them. So they are all in 1 district, so that's sort of packing. I think what a lot of people, until you really start to look at it, don't realize is how you can be completely sort of well-meaning and still end up gerrymandering, right? Because there's a million different things, so somebody on Twitter asked, why don't they just use latitude and longitude lines? So there might be a lot of perfectly good reasons you wouldn't just sort of draw squares or circles or something. One of them being you might want to keep everybody in the same county, in the same district. So you might, things can look a little weird for that reason. Another reason, and this is sort of can get super complicated, is that you may, in fact, want to increase the representation by minorities. You may want to put them in the same district. So, in fact, you could, in a place like Alabama, maybe you do want to put all of the African-American members in one district, so they are very likely to vote for an African-American member of Congress who you wouldn't otherwise see. So there can be well-meaning reasons for doing some of this. Odd-looking districts don't necessarily mean that someone had some sort of ill intent behind it.
But unfortunately, sadly, a lot of the most gerrymandered states have been a real effort. And I'm not going to say the Democrats don't gerrymander. They do, but far less frequency. The GOP has been working on this for about 2 decades. About 20 years ago, it might have been longer even, they sat down and said, guess what? Since the states are in charge of drawing up districts, we have this great idea. Let's go ahead and really infiltrate local and state level politics so that we can be in charge of that districting. And then eventually what will happen is it will trickle down into us being able to win national because we'll have these districts set up in a way that favors us. And so when you look at the Southern strategy, this is based almost entirely on this idea that they worked pretty hard to get folks in the state and local levels so that they could draw districts that favored Republicans. And when you look at the most gerrymandered states in the United States, that's why you continue to come up with a lot of Southern states. It's not exclusively Southern states, but there are quite a few on that list that are in the South for precisely this reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, so there are a couple of exceptions, as you noted, where Democrats do this as well. Maryland is the most famous example. My state, Illinois, has been run by Democrats, and it does favor Democrats, although not quite as much as some of these Republican favored states show up. But yeah, so there's some definite states where we can see, I mean, you can just sort of, if you know anything about the state, or even if you don't, I mean, like I said, you can have lines that look a little weird and not have it be ill-meaning, but some of these lines are just, if you look at the map of Ohio, if you look at the map of North Carolina, these things, it's just clear that somebody went to a lot of effort to have...
Yeah, some of them are just bizarrely ridiculous. And we say you can spot them because they're so skinny, right? Because what they've done is they've tried to connect this little group up here with a very small strip of land, maybe, by a highway, down to this other urban area down here, and pack them all into the same district so that the rest of the area, which is most likely to vote for Republicans, doesn't muddy up the waters in that district. It's almost hilarious when you look at some of the maps because you think, how on earth could those two groups of people have anything in common?
Yes, absolutely. And, if you look, the state other than Illinois that I know the best is Ohio. I grew up there. My parents still live there. A bunch of my family lives there. And so when I look at Ohio maps, I can look and I can see exactly why they're doing what they're doing. I can see, oh, you carved out this little neighborhood right here. So it would or would not be in this particular district. And it's very effective. So in Ohio, which again is the state that I know the best, this past election in 2018, there are 16 districts in Ohio, and 4 of them are Democrats and 12 are Republicans, but it was about a 50-50 vote. So the Republicans got more votes, but only by a little bit, only by a few percentage. And so it's clear that, maybe there should be, 9-7 or even 10-6, but it shouldn't be 12-4 based on votes, based on percentage of votes.
Yeah, and it looks like there was a court ruling, was that today, about Ohio districting?
Yeah, so there was. So Ohio, I should note, when we say the states have the ability to draw the lines, this is done differently in different states. Up until now, Ohio has let their state legislature do it. As you noted, the Republicans tried very hard to win state legislature seats and did a very good job of it. And in a lot of states, like Ohio, you can spend a lot of money as an individual on a race for state legislature, so you can do a lot of work buying seats. But the citizens of Ohio have voted to, I believe it was an amendment to their state constitution, to say that instead of the state legislature drawing the seats, that there would be a commission that would draw the lines, draw the districts. But that has not gone into effect yet. It won't go into effect until after the 2020 census. So the first time it will be in effect is for the 2022 House races. So right now, the 2018 election and the 2020 election are on the old maps. So the ACLU brought a case saying that these are unconstitutional, the current maps as they stand. And a 3-district judicial panel agreed and said, yes, this is gerrymandered.
The problem is going to be when it goes to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court, if I remember correctly, last year took up the case. Was it out of Wisconsin? I think it was out of Wisconsin. And said that partisan gerrymandering wasn't a thing, that it had to be racial gerrymandering to be unconstitutional. And so it'll be interesting to see if they take up these cases again, because there are quite a few of them. It's not just Ohio. I believe is it Pennsylvania?
Michigan was just recently.
There's a few of them.
In Pennsylvania, the Republicans, so this also went to their state court, or the federal court, but in Pennsylvania, the Republicans did not choose to appeal. So they just agreed to redraw the maps. The Ohio Republicans are not going to do that. They are going to appeal. They've already, within moments, requested a stay, so they didn't have to immediately redraw the lines, and they're going to wait for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is supposed to make a ruling on, I think, North Carolina.
Yeah, they've been fighting that North Carolina one for years.
Yeah, yes. But they're supposed to make some sort of ruling in June. And so I think the Ohio Republicans are counting on the Supreme Court going their way, and they're just going to wait until then.
What's interesting about the North Carolina one is you can actually say that that's racial gerrymandering and not partisan gerrymandering. And I think that's why they have such a strong case. When you look at Wisconsin or probably maybe Michigan and Ohio, and you're going to argue partisan gerrymandering, that's where we are not sure which side the Supreme Court is going to take up there. I'm very hesitant about how that's going to shake out, given who's on the Supreme Court right now.
Yes, and I think so. Neil Gorsuch apparently has been questioning whether the court should even have anything to say about it. One of the reasons is that Ohio has recently come up with this amendment to their constitution so that the lines will be drawn differently. Michigan did something similar with a ballot measure. And so some of the states are, in fact, finding ways around it without the courts, although the courts would speed things up a little bit. But it's not the case in every state that you could do that. It's a lot. There aren't ballot measures in every state, for instance, and so it can be a lot more difficult to change the way the lines are drawn.
Or it could be like Utah, where they just ignore the ballot measures that you vote for and pass and do whatever they want, right?
Yes.
That's what happens here.
Indeed, it could be like that. I don't believe that's the only state where that's happening.
Yeah. And, I hail from Utah, and a lot of people don't think of Utah as gerrymandered. They just assume, it's a completely red state. But actually, Salt Lake City is very, very blue. There are 10% more registered Democrats than there are Republicans within the city limits, and that demographic is certainly spread to the suburbs. And what they did to Salt Lake City is what they've essentially done to Austin. It looks like a little pizza. Every district takes a slice out of Salt Lake City. So Salt Lake City is divided into 4, and that's how we end up with all Republicans representing us in Congress, because we get diluted by all of the rest of the state. So we recently, just in the last election, finally elected a Democrat, and that was quite a battle against Mia Love. But years and years of gerrymandering, and they're not going to approve a commission here. They're not going to do that. They just won't. And the state legislature, I think, is 70% or maybe 80% Republican. It's just not even a possibility. So.
Yeah, although Utah, I think, could be one of the states that gains a seat after the next census. I believe Utah was very close to gaining a seat last time around. Illinois is going to lose a seat, and that is going to be fraught and complicated. There's a couple, in addition to packing and cracking, there's a couple of other terms that are used in gerrymandering. One, I believe, is called hijacking. So hijacking is when 2 districts are redrawn, and this actually happened in Pennsylvania, although I don't think it was malicious, but forces incumbents to run against each other because the way the lines have been redrawn, they are now in the same district.
Yep.
And the other one is called kidnapping, where you move an incumbent's home address into another district, and re-election is harder for them because either they have to choose between their old district where they no longer reside, in which case people might not want to vote for them, or their new district, which may not be very friendly to them. So that is going to happen. I mean, some of those things just have to happen. Probably, if you're going to lose a House district, like we're going to in Illinois, somebody's going to lose out, right? One of the incumbents can no longer be a representative. So, how that happens and what that looks like can be very fraught.
Well, and it's interesting because if you look at, I think it was 2016, 80% of incumbents held on to their seats. But that's just ridiculous. Like, how is that democracy in action? Because Congress, on average, has an approval rating that hovers in the pretty low digits. Some folks are as low as like 15% approval rating. How does that person keep getting reelected? And you have to imagine that some of this is just not reflecting the electorate. It's a rigged system to a certain extent. So,
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is coming up a lot. People are talking about whether prisoners should be able to vote. And it's fairly unpopular that prisoners can vote. Bernie Sanders has come out in favor of it, but most of the Democrats aren't willing to go there. Polling shows that most Americans are not in favor of people who are currently in prison voting. But one of the really big effects that this can have is that when the lines are drawn, the population within a prison is counted as residents of the district in which the prison is in. So not the home district where they were living before being in prison, but they are counted in where they are in prison, but they do not have the right to vote. So this is actually considered like a form of gerrymandering, prison gerrymandering. And it often is the case that federal prisons are in more rural districts, but the people who are in prison there are from more urban districts.
Yeah. And given the incarceration rate, you have to imagine, it's sort of ridiculous to separate out some of these things as if they don't coexist, right? So we talk about partisan gerrymandering, but when we talk about partisan gerrymandering that's unfavorable to Democrats, to some extent, we're also talking about racial gerrymandering. And that's certainly true as well if you were to talk about prison gerrymandering. I mean, the incarceration rate among the Black community is much, much higher. And so we can't talk about prison gerrymandering without talking about racial gerrymandering. They are, to some extent, sort of overlapping circles.
Yes. Somebody asked on Twitter, is there any chance that we can have some sort of national solution to this that will fix this? I think the short answer is no. You know, ideally the Supreme Court would come out with some sort of ruling against partisan gerrymandering, and there'd be some sort of method by which you could at least bring things to the court if they didn't meet some sort of standard. But it would take a constitutional amendment, I believe, to change the way lines are drawn, in the sense that, you know, to have some sort of federal commission that drew lines instead of the states, that would take a constitutional amendment. So I don't see a whole lot of hope for a national solution, certainly not in the current political environment that we are in. I would like to see more states, as states, adopt some sort of bipartisan or nonpartisan commission to do it.
Well, and I can't see SCOTUS really supporting that. The Constitution very much is set up to favor states' rights to a certain extent, and so it would be quite a departure from that, I think, to have a national sort of effort on that in a constitutional amendment. I can't see it happening for that reason and because of the current political climate.
Yes. So I think nobody asked this question, but it's something that I've thought about is, you know, can computers just draw the lines? And the answer is yes, actually they can. Computers are getting better and better at this. One of the things that has been proposed in these court cases to be used is something called the efficiency gap. And so that's basically how many votes are wasted. So if you're in Ohio, if you're in one of these 4 blue districts that are like 85% blue, you're a Democrat, you're essentially, a lot of those votes are wasted, right? Same basically if you're a Democrat in any of these red districts, your vote is wasted. So there's always going to be some efficiency gap. It's impossible to draw lines that, you know, perfectly make every district 50-50, and, you know, you wouldn't even necessarily want that. But computers can do a much better job than humans can, drawing lines that have minimal efficiency gaps, that can also do things like keep county lines if you wanted that, or look at things like racial profiles. And so, you know, I don't think probably anybody would be comfortable just saying, okay, computer, you do this, but you could have a computer do the first pass at it, and then a commission looks at it and sees what they think about the lines that were drawn. So that is something that we're definitely moving toward. There's even a website out there. If you want to play with this, draw your own lines, you can do that. There's something called Dave's Redistricting. So some guy, Dave Bradley, has designed this. The 538 website also has a bunch of maps that they've put together, and you can say, okay, for my state, show me the current district boundaries. Show me if we gerrymandered to favor Republicans, which in some cases looks exactly the same as the current boundaries. Show me if we gerrymandered to favor Democrats. Show me if we broke it down by, you know, what the partisan split should be. Show me really compact districts. Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can draw the maps. And I think once you start looking at a lot of those, you can see it's not that straightforward. There's a lot of things that go into drawing these lines, and, you know, it's a hard job. Hopefully people are going into it trying to do the best job they can, the most fair that they can. But even if you are, it's a big job.
Yeah, and I'm always mindful of when we run into technology issues. A great example of this is the story recently about the airport scanners. You probably heard about this, where whoever designed the machines that are doing some of this work did not take into account that people with various ethnicities have larger hair. So the scanners just don't accommodate for that, and they flag people who have more ethnic hair more often. And it's one of those things where the folks who are usually in charge of designing these machines and the corporations who fund them are unfortunately not run by folks who are mindful of these things. And oftentimes it's not intentional, right? They didn't set out to have a machine that flagged and focused on certain minorities, but that's what they ended up with because they didn't approach the design from a mindset that did encompass all the people who should be sitting at the table. So I'm always mindful of that when we talk about technology. It is also about who is involved in the process of designing it and implementing it. And we have to make sure that those folks are diverse because they're going to think of things that, for better or for worse, we did not think of, just because we're not mindful of those challenges because they're not part of our everyday life.
There are some really good explainer videos, so we've tried to talk sort of a more nuanced view, but if you want just sort of a down and dirty, what does it look like when you're drawing lines very simply, not drawing lines in states, but like what is the difference between cracking and packing? And there are some really good videos. I'll post one of them on our website. There's one from Washington Post. I showed it to my 7-year-old and he immediately understood what was going on. So it's pretty simple to understand at the basic level. And I think it really helps you sort of look at sort of what are the things at stake here and what do I need to be thinking about. I did want to mention also, it's not just we've been focusing on federal congressional districts, but it's also state House and state Senate districts. And those lines are often also drawn by state legislatures, which can then use them to protect incumbency, which they very often do. And so once you get in power, you can sort of really stay in power very nicely as you're drawing lines for yourself. So that's another thing to look at. How I think if you're going to take any sort of homework away from this episode is go look at your own district, your state House, state Senate, U.S. House district. Do you even know what your district lines are? I mean, I didn't know until fairly recently what my district lines look like. In fact, if I look out my dining room, I can see another district. So I have a very odd-shaped district as well. And, do you know what your lines look like? Do you know who else you're in a district with? Do you know what the typical gap is? How far away is your district from flipping to the other party? What would it look like if all of the lines were redrawn? So, I think there's some very interesting things to play with there. And then look at how lines are drawn in your state. And, if you're in a state where you could start a ballot measure to have this move to an independent commission, for instance, might be something worth looking into. There's models now. Michigan did a really good job at getting that ballot measure through. So that would be a place to look for inspiration.
And I think, a lot of people aren't even aware of what district they're in. I had to correct one of my friends during the last election. He was swearing up and down to me that he voted for a particular candidate. And I was like, you couldn't have. That person's not in your ballot. That's not even your district. And he was certain he was in a completely different district than the one he was in. And I was like, look, I got the map and I will show you. But there's no way you could have voted for this person because this person isn't representing your district. It was kind of hilarious, but also super frightening.
So go find out what district you're in.
Yeah. And who represents you. If you're not sure, that's also a good thing to know.
And it is not a law in most places that the representative has to live in the district. Usually they just have to live in the state. So it would also be fun to look at whether your representative actually lives in your district or not.
Yeah, that does happen. Not as often, but I remember John Ossoff. Didn't he not live in the district that he ran for? And that was sort of a sticking point for them.
He lived right down the street.
No.
I have actually considered running for Congress in a district that is not the one I live in. I happen to love my representative, but the district that I can see when I look out my dining room window, the district I walk into every day to go to work in, I don't love that representative as much. And I've often thought,
Yeah, Yeah, that's not such a bad idea.
All right. Well, on that note, I think this has been really good. Hopefully you learned something about gerrymandering. If you listen to this episode and you still have questions, feel free to tweet at us. We're at Two Broads Talk, and Kaz is at Kaz Weida. And if we don't know the answers, we're happy to find some experts who do know the answers and can hook you up with some knowledge. So please feel free to tweet at us.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Kaz.
Thank you.
All right. This is Kelly, and I am here with Teddy. Hi, Teddy.
Hello.
And Teddy, how old are you?
7.
What grade are you in?
1st grade.
Okay, so Teddy and I just watched an explainer video that the Washington Post did about gerrymandering. So, Teddy, what do you think about gerrymandering?
I think that it is villainy. It is very bad.
Very bad. Okay, what makes you think it's bad?
It makes voting unfair.
Okay, makes voting unfair. So we saw 3 different ways of drawing lines. Were they all good, all bad? Was there a good way of drawing lines in the way that we saw?
Maybe.
Maybe. What about the first way where 60% of the people were in the blue party and 60% of the seats went to the blue party? Did that seem fair?
Not to the Republicans, but I would say it was fair because people make districts like regular.
So then the percentage of the districts and the percentage of the voters lined up?
Yes.
And so that's something that you think is fair?
The Republicans might think it's not, but it actually is.
Well, they might not like it, but it seems like it's fair.
It is fair.
What did you think about the third set of maps where 60% of the voters were in the blue party, but 60% of the representatives were in the red party? You didn't like that one?
Boo.
Well, I think you're thinking blue as Democrats and red as Republicans.
Well, yeah, I know it's not always, but
Well, what if it was
this was...
the purple party and the green party? Would it still bother you as much?
If the purple was the Democrats and the green was the Republicans.
Okay, but take it away from which party is which. If one party has more voters but less districts, what do you think about that, regardless of which party it is?
I think of that as unfair.
Unfair? Okay. Which do you think is more important, having districts that match by numbers or having districts that are close to each other? So that's something in gerrymandering that they call compact. We saw those really stretch out districts. What if you could draw districts that were really close to each other, but the numbers didn't match up? Which one of those would be more important to you?
The numbers not matching up.
Okay, so you think it's really important that the numbers of the voters match the numbers of the representatives?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, and do you remember who gerrymandering was named for?
Albert Jerry.
Yeah. All right. Was this something you'd ever thought about before today?
No.
Is it something you'll pay attention to in the future?
Yes.
All right. And everybody should pay attention to it because in 2020, after the census, they're going to draw the lines all over again.
I hope they draw it in a compact but fair way.
All right. Thank you, Teddy.
You're welcome.
The Vote Her In segment is a collaboration of Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Our segment editor is Rachel Wallstad. Our theme song is called Are You Listening off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.